What's up everybody? Welcome back to my channel. If you are new here, welcome to my channel. So today's video is going to be me talking about my experience with blood clots in both lungs. So let's get started. So first things first, I do just want to let you know I am still a little bit out of breath, especially when I talk for like extended periods of time. So if I get a little bit winded, I apologize. All of this is still very new. This just happened about a month ago. So I'm still very much healing and recovering and like processing all of this. So you'll just have to forgive me. But let's just jump right in. So this whole thing kind of started with a bit of an ironic situation that actually happened about 1 week before. And I don't know if it was some sort of like subtle like foreshadowing or what. But basically 1 week before I found out about the blood clots, I had to go get routine blood work for my thyroid because I have hypothyroidism and I take levothyroxine, and so I get blood drawn every year just to make sure that like my, medication is working and make sure everything is good. So I went in to the lab to get the blood work done, and the woman, goes to draw the blood, and she said that my blood like squirted out. And she said, "That's really weird." She said, "I've never seen that." And she said, "Are you on blood thinners?" And I was like, "No." And so she was kind of like joking about it or whatever. And she was like, "Your blood was like really eager to get out of there." And I was like, "That's really weird. Like no one's ever said that before." And so I like was thinking about it afterwards and I was like, "That's really weird. Like why would my blood be doing that?" And so it was like just kind of like an ironic thing, because as it turns out, my blood was actually not thin at all, which was how I ended up with the clots. So literally 1 week later, it was a Friday, I was at work and I had been in like a really good routine since like mid-February where I was going to the gym about 5 days a week, just trying to lose weight and also just like, get healthy again. I used to be a personal trainer, and so, health and fitness is really important to me. So I was at work, it was a Friday, and I was like a little bit tired, a little bit out of breath, and I had my gym bag, and I was gonna go to the gym after work like I had been doing, and something was just telling me like, no, just go home and rest. And I was like, well, I kind of want to go to the gym though. I've got like a good routine going, and my body was just like, just go home. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna listen to my body and go home. And so I'm at home, I'm just hanging out, watching TV, and I felt perfectly fine. Like I didn't feel out of breath. I didn't feel anything at that point. And so I was sitting there watching TV and I get an alert on my Apple Watch. And if you've seen this, you'll know what I'm talking about, but it's like the alert that says that your heart rate is high, but you're not active. And it like pops up and it said my heart rate was like 145. And I was like, okay, that's kind of scary because I've never seen it that high before, other than like when I'm working out. And I have seen that alert before, but usually it's like 120, not 145. And so like 2 hours later, I get another alert and it said my heart rate was like 130. And then about an hour after that, I get a third alert and it said it was like 135 or something like that. And I was like, okay, this is really weird because I don't know what is going on. I still felt perfectly fine. Like I didn't feel like my heart was racing. I didn't feel like, something was wrong. And I was like, well, that's weird. And so I ended up, going to bed, no problems. And I woke up around like 8 a.m. and my cat, Maddox, was hungry. He wanted his breakfast, which was a little weird because he usually doesn't eat breakfast that early. And I was like, okay, I'll get up and give him his breakfast. And when I got up, I felt a pain on my left side, like when I would breathe in, but it wasn't very bad. And I just thought maybe it was like a pulled muscle or like maybe I like slept funny. I don't know. And so I get up, I feed him, I lay back down, and I was able to fall right back asleep. So I was thinking like it must not be that bad, right? Because I was able to go back to sleep and I wasn't thinking anything of it. And so I woke up a few hours later and I had a Chick-fil-A grilled chicken sandwich, and immediately after eating, the pain, I mean, this is going to sound so dramatic, because I know it's going to sound crazy, but the pain was literally 10 out of 10. It felt like I couldn't breathe. It felt like I couldn't move. It just felt like paralyzed with pain. And I don't know what eating had to do with it. I don't know what would bring that on, but the pain was literally through the roof, like worst pain I've ever felt in my entire life. I've never had clots before. I've never had problems with my lungs. I've had bronchitis like twice, maybe. I think I've had COVID 3 times. That's it. Have never had any issues like this before. So didn't know what was going on. So I called my aunt and my mom. And so my aunt had said to take some Motrin, and she said there was some Motrin that she had left here the last time she was here. And normally I'm more of a Tylenol girly, but she said the Motrin would help if there's any inflammation, because she said it sounded like inflammation. So I said, okay, cool. So I take the Motrin, and for like 40 minutes, I'm just like paralyzed in pain. I couldn't move. I'm just like kind of like half laying on my bed and like half trying to sit up, but it hurt with every breath, but it also hurt if I would hold my breath. And it just felt like I was being stabbed, like in my lower lungs. It just felt like a knife. And so my aunt and my mom were still on the phone, and they have me on speaker so like they can both hear me. And so they're like, well, we need to call an ambulance. And so I'm like, no, because one, the front door is dead bolted, and I'm like, they can't get in, and I don't want them to break down the door. And number two, I was like, I don't want to freak out Maddox. He's an older cat. He'll be 12 in a few weeks, and he gets spooked very easily. And I was like, I just don't want to do that unless it's like absolutely necessary. So they're like, okay, like wait and see, you know, for the Motrin to kick in, see what happens. So I'm like, okay. So about 40 minutes later, I don't know how I made it through that 40 minutes, but the pain had gone down to like maybe like an 8 out of 10. It was still excruciating, but I was able to stand up very slowly, very like gingerly. I unlocked the front door, and at that point I knew I had to go to the hospital, because I was like, I don't want to be at home when that pain starts up again, because I knew like something is wrong. So I was able to brush my teeth, brush my hair. At that point I was still in my pajamas, so I put on leggings, put on a t-shirt, and I fed Maddox, because I was like, I don't know how long I'm going to be gone for. So the two of them were able to call the ambulance for me, and I said, no lights, no sirens. Like, I don't want to make a big commotion. I don't want the neighbors to be like, what's going on? And not to mention, like, just for me personally, all of that, like, loud noises and all that would just send me into a panic. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So they show up, and I was able to open up the front door. They came in, and luckily no lights, no sirens. And so they're just asking me like, what's going on? And I'm explaining it to them. And so I said it got worse after I ate. And so the one paramedic, he was like, well, it sounds like it could be something gastro. And he said, but you know, we'll let the hospital take a look. So I'm like, okay. So while we're in the ambulance and they're taking me to the hospital, he's asking me like, do I have any history of gastro problems? And I'm like, oh, if only you knew. I have several videos here on my channel where I talk about my history with C. diff. I had C. diff multiple times. I had a rare strain of it. It was like a whole big thing. But I've also had diverticulitis. I've had stomach ulcers. I've had acid reflux literally since the day I was born. I am no stranger to anything gastro. And so I was telling him, like, it doesn't feel gastro, but I'm not the professional, so I can't say. I said, it just hurts when I breathe. And so he was like, okay. So they take me to the hospital. They took me to the one that was just the closest, like, local hospital. And, you know, they take you straight into a room, which I was kind of surprised. Like, you know, there's no triage or anything, because I know some people think, like, just because you arrive in an ambulance that you're going to be seen first, but obviously that's not the case. It goes based off of urgency. So I'm thinking they're just going to like put me in the waiting room, and you know, because I'm up, I'm like talking to them, even though I'm in extreme pain, like I'm talking to them, I'm alert, I'm awake. So I'm, you know, but they put me straight into a room. The nurse comes in and she does her thing, you know, blood pressure, heart rate, temperature, all that. My heart rate was high. It was like 155. Blood pressure was high. No temperature though. And they get the first IV started. And so then the doctor comes in and, you know, they're asking me like, you know, have you recently had COVID? I'm like, no. I told them I had the flu back in February, but, you know, they said, you know, that's been long enough. We don't think that that has anything to do with this. They asked me if I had a history of clots, and I'm like, no. And so the doctor's like, okay, So he's like, well, we're going to do blood work, then an x-ray, and then a CT scan in that order. And I'm like, all right, cool. So for the majority of the time, I'm just sitting in the room, you know, by myself, just sitting there. And after a little while, it was like you could tell the Motrin had like finally fully kicked in, because the pain had gone down to maybe like a 4 out of 10, if I had to guess. Um, and so I was kind of sitting there and I was like, this just feels really like over dramatic. I'm like, what if there's nothing wrong at all? Like, what if it's like indigestion or something? And so I'm like, okay. So they come in, you know, they draw the blood or whatever, and then I get the results on my phone on the patient portal after about 15 minutes, which was crazy because for a Saturday afternoon, I thought it was going to take forever to get these results, and the results pop up 15 minutes. And everything was like high. The white blood cell count was high, a bunch of other stuff was high, and then there's like a separate like result that comes in after all the other ones. And I know I'm going to pronounce a lot of stuff wrong in this video. You'll have to forgive me. My degree is in engineering. I'm not a nurse. I'm not a doctor. I know I'm going to say a lot of things wrong, but it was something called D-dimer or D-dimer. And that was like high, like it popped up like abnormal, really high. So I Googled it, because I'm still sitting in the room by myself, just waiting. And it came up on Google and it said it could be either pneumonia or blood clots. So in my mind, I'm still not thinking blood clots. I'm thinking, okay, I have pneumonia. Like, that's what I'm thinking. And so then the woman comes in to do the x-ray and she's like, well, we can do the x-ray right here in the room. You don't have to get up. And I was like, okay, cool. So she does the x-ray, and then again, I get the result on my phone and the x-ray is completely clear. So I'm like, I always thought that pneumonia would show up on an x-ray. That was always my understanding. So I'm like, okay, maybe it's not pneumonia. And so, you know, I'm just sitting there waiting. You know, the nurse would pop in, she would check my blood pressure every now and then, you know, and then she'd leave. So finally, after about 4 hours, they come and get me for the CT scan. And so when they had me stand up to walk over to the wheelchair was when I realized, like, okay, it hurts really bad. And it is a good thing I came to the hospital. So they, luckily it was like right down the hall. So they take me for the CT scan, and you know how the machine gives you like prompts and it's like, you know, hold your breath. Okay, breathe, blah, blah, blah. And, yeah, I just know mine was probably all over the place because I could not hold my breath. I could not breathe on demand. I was just trying to like, just get through it. And so, we finished up with that. They took me back to the room and I'm just sitting there. And so about 30 minutes later, the results for that pop up on my phone. And so I click on it and it's like loading, whatever. And so it pops up, but as soon as it pops up, like 6 nurses come in the room. And so they're all super nice, super friendly. And the one nurse, she's like, I'm going to get a second IV started on you. The other nurse is like, okay, we're going to do your blood pressure and your heart rate again. Another nurse is like, okay, we're going to do an EKG. And then like somebody else is on the computer typing. And then the original nurse I had, she comes in. And so she's like, you're going to meet a lot of people today. And so in my mind, I'm like, something bad just happened. But I'm like, I know better than to ask the nurses because I know they can't tell me. They're just going to say, you have to wait for the doctor. You know, we can't tell you. So there was 2 nurses like standing in the doorway, and one of them said to the other, what is she in for? And the other nurse just stared at her, like didn't say anything. So in my mind, I'm like, something really horrific must have just happened and I have no idea what it is. And the result is like sitting on my phone and I can't pick up the phone to read it because one arm is getting an IV and the other arm is getting, you know, blood pressure, heart rate, all that. And so I'm like, okay, I don't know what's happening. And so after about 5 minutes, the doctor comes in and he's holding up the printout, like picture or whatever of my lungs from the CT scan. And he's like, well, pictures tell us a lot. I'm like, okay, what did they say? And so he's like, you have blood clots in both lungs. And so I knew that that's a bad thing, but I'm like, okay, because I felt totally fine. Like as I'm sitting there, you know, it's not like when you have the flu where you feel like, you know, sick, like all over or whatever. I mean, even when I had C. diff, I felt ill, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, like now what? And so he's like, well, what questions do you have? And I'm like, well, how bad is it? He goes, it's bad. I was like, okay. So he's like, you're going to be admitted. And he said, but we don't have a pulmonary like area here in this hospital. So he's like, you're gonna have to go to the other like main location. And I've been there before, so I was like, okay, you know, no problem. It's only like 20 minutes away. Um, but my biggest concern at that point was, one, I'd never been admitted to the hospital before. I was like, I don't know how I'm going to handle this mentally. Number two was, you know, Maddox, my cat, was at home alone. And I was like, well, I have to tell my family so somebody can get there to be there with Maddox. And luckily my aunt has a key to the apartment because she co-signed for me. So that wasn't an issue, thank God. But I'm like asking them about like the dumbest things because I was like, I don't have my phone charger. I'm like, I don't have a change of clothes. I said, you know, I take levothyroxine every morning. I don't have it with me. And so they're like, we'll figure all that out. Like, that's the least of your concerns right now. So I'm like, okay. So they draw a whole bunch of more blood work or whatever, because they're like, we're gonna check for like genetic things and like all this other stuff. And I'm like, okay. So we're sitting there waiting, and then they get the alert or whatever that the ambulance was there and that the bed was ready at the other hospital. So they're like, okay, they're going to transport you. And those paramedics were also very, very nice. And the one that rode in the back with me, she was, you know, young woman, probably like roughly my age. And so she was just asking me like, you know, do you have a history of clots? Like, what brought this on? And so I was talking to her and I was like, no, like, you know, I was asking her, I was like, do you see this often in people, you know, my age? And so she was like, you know, sometimes, yeah, but not, you know, super common, but it's also not uncommon either. And so I'm like, okay. And so, you know, she was just talking to me, whatever. And then we get there, they take me straight to my room, and a bunch of nurses came in to talk to me. And then the lung doctor came in and talked to me. And so he said, you know, it's very serious and, you know, it's pretty bad. But he said, as long as, you know, the treatment goes well, you're young, you'll make a full recovery, you'll be fine. So I'm like, okay. So I said, well, how long am I going to be there? He said, probably until Monday or Tuesday. So in my mind, I'm like freaking out because I've never been away from Maddox for longer than 48 hours. Like, since he's lived with me, we're inseparable. Like, he goes on vacation with me, he sleeps next to me in bed every night. Like, that is my baby. And I'm just like, okay, this is gonna be hard. And so they brought me like a cute, I guess, you know, as cute as it could be when you're hospitalized, little like welcome kit. And it had like a toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, like hand wipes, Kleenex. And they brought that to me, and I was like, thank God, I can at least be able to brush my teeth and whatnot. So yeah, I'm like a huge stickler for brush. I have to brush my teeth twice a day, every day, like no exceptions. So I know that's like such a dumb thing to worry about in the moment, but I was like, I just want to feel a little bit normal. And then the nurse was able to charge my phone for me, so that was really nice of her. And then, so at the hospital, everything was pretty uneventful. Just a lot of doctors coming to talk to me, a lot of like, you know, people checking on me. You know, they would come in, listen to my breathing, all of that, ask me questions. They would look at my legs. They wanted to make sure I didn't have any like signs of any more clots in my legs. And so, yeah, like I said, pretty uneventful. The next day though, I did have a little bit of a little side incident. My blood pressure was extremely, extremely high. And the nurse said, we need to give you something to bring it down. And I was like, okay. So she gets approval from the doctor. The doctor ordered, again, I'm going to say this wrong. I don't know how to pronounce this. I want to say it was hydralazine. I don't know. So the nurse comes in, she puts it in the IV, and she leaves. And all of a sudden, I feel like I couldn't breathe. And I felt like my face was getting really hot, my ears were getting really hot, and I was like, okay, like something is going on here. And so I was like, I probably should call the nurse, but I was like, I don't want to bother them because I just felt like they're really busy, and I was like, I just don't want to like be a bother if it's nothing. And so then I pulled up the front camera on my phone and I saw myself, and I was like, okay, I probably should call, because I had like hives like all over my neck and my like side of my face. So I hit the little call button, and so she comes on the like speaker, and so she's like, you know, what's going on? And when I went to talk was when I realized how bad it really was. And I was like, I feel funny. I was like, I don't know what's going on. And so she's like, okay, I'm coming. So she rushes in the room, and she can clearly see I have like hives all over me. And so she calls the doctor, and the doctor puts in like a, I don't know, like a note or whatever, to approve, for me to have Benadryl. So the nurse was like, okay, have you had Benadryl before? I'm like, yeah, I've had Benadryl. I said, but to be fair, I've only ever had the pill form of Benadryl. I've never had it in an IV. So she's like, okay. So, she does everything she has to do. She scans everything, whatever. So she goes to put it in the IV, and all of a sudden I get this feeling, and I don't know what this was. I have no idea, but it felt like that feeling, like when you're getting the CT scan with the contrast, like that warm feeling, but then it like stops. It felt like that, but it didn't stop. And it was like this weird sensation where it felt like all of the blood rushed out of my body. That was exactly how it felt. And I said, ooh, I said, something happened. And so she's like, what do you mean? I probably scared this poor woman like half to death. And so I said, I don't know. I said, I feel like I'm going to faint. And so she laid the bed flat, and she calls the doctor. So the doctor comes like sprinting down the hall. She comes in. And so they're just like watching my breathing for like a minute or two and watching my heart rate. And they're like, okay. And I was like awake, but it didn't feel like, something felt wrong. And so they're like, just keep breathing, just, don't panic, just, So after about 10 minutes, the doctor, they're like one on each side of me. And so the doctor said, well, she looks a little bit better, because when I first came in, she looked kind of bad. And so, the nurse was like, well, what is this? Like, what just happened? And so the doctor said, basically what she thinks happened was that when the nurse pushed through the Benadryl through the IV, it basically like not like flooded my system, but like pushed through the rest of the blood pressure medicine. And then like the allergic reaction got like really bad, but then the Benadryl came right behind it, and then it got better. So by about like the 30-minute mark was when I had felt like normal again, and I felt like all of my blood came back into my body, which was just the weirdest sensation. I don't know what that was, but yeah, that was like a little 30-minute emergency side quest. And then it was, back to regularly scheduled programming. And then after that, like I said, things were just pretty uneventful the rest of the time. They did an ultrasound on my legs to make sure there were no other clots. They did an ultrasound of my heart to make sure my heart wasn't in distress. And all of that looked good. So the biggest thing that they were concerned about at the time was my heart rate and my blood pressure. And they were like, we're not messing with your blood pressure again after that. So they just, they would come in like every like hour or two and just take my blood pressure, monitor it, make sure it wasn't like, at the level of like, you're about to drop dead. And so that was that. And then I was able to go home on Monday. And pretty much just, been recovering ever since. And I'm on blood thinners now twice a day. I do have a printout, because I'm filming this on my phone, so I cannot read it off my phone, but I printed it out of exactly what was on the patient portal, because like I said, I didn't get a chance to read the patient portal at the time, but I was able to read it afterwards, once they got me into the hospital room, and I was able to actually go on my phone and like see like, okay, what is exactly going on? Of course the doctors explain it, but they explain it, they don't want you to like panic or freak out or anything, so they kind of explain it just a real simplified way. But I wanted to see the actual like notes. So I have that printed here. Again, I'm probably gonna say a lot of this stuff wrong, so you're just gonna have to forgive me. So yeah, so basically this is the findings from the CT scan. And it says, and I'm getting out of breath, so I apologize for that too, but it says bilateral pulmonary emboli are demonstrated, including in the right lower lobe branch, right lower lobe segmental branches, a few right lower lobe subsegmental branches, the distal left main pulmonary artery, the left lower lobe branch, several left lower lobe segmental and subsegmental branches. And then it says there is also a 4.6 centimeter pulmonary infarct, which means 4.6 centimeters of my lung tissue was deprived of oxygen and it died. So there's that. And then also there was a small left-sided pleural effusion. And then everything else was normal except for that. So yeah, that's when I had my follow-up appointment with the lung doctor. I asked her, like, how many were there? And she said there was a lot of clots. And she said they were big. So she said, it's really good that you went to the hospital when you did. And like I said, once I got home, I would say the pain, it didn't get worse at home, but it was just, it was worse the more I moved around. So being at home, naturally, you're going to move around more. So the pain kind of kicked up quite a bit for the first few days before it had started coming back down. They told me it could hurt or be like sore, you know, for 3 months, up to 3 months. They said it would take around, you know, either a few weeks up to a few months for my body to break down the clots and dissolve them. So like I said, I'm now on blood thinners twice a day for at least 6 months. I have a follow-up appointment with the hematologist in a couple weeks. So the lung doctor said the hematologist will be the one to decide if I have to stay on the blood thinners forever. They are the ones that's gonna review, the blood work about like any genetic reasoning or anything like that. I don't smoke, I don't vape. I haven't been on any long trips recently. I do take birth control. I have the NuvaRing, and basically they told me that the NuvaRing does have a risk of clots, but they said that they think usually it's the birth control pills that are much higher risk of blood clots. So they pretty much, I kind of was getting like bounced around. You know, one doctor says talk to this doctor says talk to that doctor. I take it for PCOS. I did have a follow-up appointment with my endocrinologist, and I explained everything to her, and she said, go talk to your OBGYN. So I'm like, okay. So yeah, but they said as of now, as long as I'm on the blood thinners, it should be okay to continue with the birth control. But, you know, that may change. I don't know. But yeah, so like I said, I have to see the hematologist in a few weeks, and then he will decide, I guess, about the medication going forward. I haven't had any side effects with the blood thinner. If anything, I was actually concerned about like less bleeding, because, you know, with blood thinners, you could bleed more even with very small wounds. Like if you, you know, nick yourself while you're shaving, if you, you know, if your cat scratches you, like those little tiny wounds tend to bleed a lot more than they would, you know, without blood thinners. I've had none of that. And I actually was like, you know, kind of concerned. I'm like, is this normal? So that is something I have to talk to them about when I go see them. I did already call them. They just said, you know, don't worry about it for now. You know, come to your appointment. We'll talk about it then. So I'm like, okay. But yeah, so that's pretty much the whole entire story. Like I said, still feeling out of breath, especially when I talk a lot. And just trying to heal, trying to recover from all of this, trying to get back into my routine. I want to get back into going to the gym. I did go to the gym the other day, and I was only able to do about 15 minutes on the elliptical, very low resistance. Normally I can easily do 30 minutes, like no problem. High resistance doesn't bother me. So that was like a huge wake-up call. But I can tell even just by seeing myself on camera now, you know, how very pale and sickly I look. And yeah, so I'm eager to hopefully get outside and get some sun and get back to the gym and work on getting my health back in order, you know, because this has been a whirlwind of a few years. This has been crazy. Like I said, I have videos on my channel where I talk about my C. diff experience, and yeah, that was a few years ago, and now this. So yeah, things have been crazy. So yeah, that's pretty much, you know, like I said, my entire experience. Just trying to heal and take things day by day. Yeah, and then go from there and see. Like I said, I have no history of clots. This, you know, came out of nowhere. So, you know, who knows? But yeah, so that's it for this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Hopefully I'll have some more updates in the next coming weeks. If you guys have any questions or anything, let me know down in the comments, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.